So Wednesday, December 6th, I'm going to be teaching a class. It's hosted by Value Collective, and I will be teaching with Goldjian. It's going to be presented in English, but they're going to lovingly do the translation to French. I'm sorry I don't have somebody willing to do translations into Spanish, or if you might want another language, please reach out and see what we can do. Or if you have a language you're willing to do whisper translations in, I would love to chat with you about that and see what kind of share we might come up with. So December 6th, I'm going to be teaching about, I call it support weaving or weaving a support constellation. I most often hear folks refer to it as pod mapping. I think that technology is a little different than how folks are endeavoring to use it. So I've been using a different term, but I wanted to come on here and kind of give you a little bit of what are just off the bat, a couple of lessons that I've learned from having a pod and from being a part of many different pods, several different pods, and supporting other people as they're putting these support weaves together. So in the class, we'll go over a lot more detail and kind of the hows, and we're going to get into more of the embodied what's. But here, I just wanted to offer a little bit of these are some of the top tips that I've gotten out of the experiences I've had. So let's see. I think first and foremost is clarity. Clarity in the ask. So when you're putting together a support pod or a support weave, what is it you're looking for? If you're just wanting to map out the people that support you when you need, that's a whole different thing. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is more based on the technology of pod mapping, which is grounded in social justice needs of somebody has been harmed or somebody has done harm, and both of these people may need support. So for creating a support weave, I'm asking, what is your specific ask? An example might be the loss of a loved one, the process of grief and the process of going through their home and the process of handling debt or an estate or whatever that might be. Another example might be an artist has a large project they're working on, and in the past that has sent them into spirals of, let's say, needing emotional support and community care. And so they're putting together a support weave to help them through this next project. Another example might be somebody is endeavoring to do, let's say, I'm trying to think of an example from one of the pods I've been a part of, and with some privacy also allowed. Let's say that you are taking a course in school and harm is done by an instructor, and you need support to be able to not just process but deal with the bureaucracy that comes with that shit, things like this. So it's very specific. There's clarity in the ask. This is the thing I need support around. And then the time frame of that, and be generous, So maybe you think it'll take 3 months, ask for 5. Maybe you're like, well, this is going to be lifelong, but immediately what I need is support for the next year. For me, I created a support pod because my husband, whom I've lived with for 20 years, needed more support than I was able to give. And we needed to transition to him into a place where he had round-the-clock care, because I couldn't provide that. And after 20 years, that was going to take a minute. And I also wanted him to be able to do it from a place of sovereignty and really make sure that he was on board, thankfully. It wasn't at a place where it was like, oh, this needs to happen now, but it was like, this is imminent. So we gave ourselves a year. And I asked my support weave folks to commit to a year. We ended up getting it done in about 10 months. So let's say, yeah. So what is the specificity of your ask? And what is the time frame that you're asking of people? This isn't indefinitely. Again, this isn't for just your general support. This is, I have a need, um, and I need to get to this other place. I am currently here, and I want collective care to do that. So that's the first lesson that I would say. Um, Also, in the specificity, like when you're inviting people in, knowing what you're inviting them in for. So, an example might be, let's say I want to invite my trans friends into helping me through the process of um, a medical transition or surgery. But let's say my trans friends are, their, their capacity might be okay. Their capability, a little less so. Their performance, even less so. So the reality is, these are not the folks, maybe for me in my sphere, who are the most resourced and the most um, able to show up for me. So I might actually aim for the cis folks who this doesn't ping their stuff. They have more capacity. Maybe they have more resources to be able to support me. I might ask them to be like first round of folks who's going to show up for me. And I might ask my trans friends to take a second back, and be my backup folks and help me with some of the other pieces that are less imminent and that take less resources, so that I'm not pulling from folks who are already short on resources as it is. I have a BIPOC friend who was like, I need a pod. I would love it if my BIPOC friends would show up, and I'm not going to ask them of that. I've got plenty of comfortable enough white, well capacitated friends. I'm going to ask them to do the bulk of the labor, and my friends of color can do some of the other support pieces that ask less of them. So being mindful of this for your own sake, as well as for the people who are offering care. Um, let's see. Also, what you're wanting from each specific person. I love this moment. So I recommend that, like, the first meeting of a group, of a weave, of a pod, uh, people come in having answered a couple of questions. And the point is to get to the heart of, what are you really able to offer? What do you want to offer? And what does the person asking for their needs to be met? What do they need? What do they want of you specifically, each individual? So an example might be the very first time we got together, my pod group, um, to support me with my husband's transition. Uh, One of my dear friends went immediately to, okay, we need to know, how is his health? What are his needs? What is he looking for in a retirement space? Things like this. And I was so shocked. And I was like, oh, no, that's not why I've asked you here. I've been taking care of this man for 20 years. I can figure out how to do this transition for him. I need support for me. This is also a major life transition for me. That's why I've called you in, is to help hold me through this loss and transition of my life as I've known it. Now, my husband and I, over 20 years, we've been through a lot of motherfucking transitions. Let me tell you, literally and figuratively. Um, but this was one of the largest. So um, again, specificity. And with that person, what was interesting to me is that that person is not a logistics person. Like, that is not their strong suit. But I love so much that they're like, oh, okay, take care. So I'm going to help you with, like, getting shit done. And I was like, oh, no, I don't need help with getting shit done. I can do that. I'm very high functioning when I'm unwell. I need you to notice when I'm unwell because I won't notice. Um, and that person in particular doesn't have a lot of capacity, and their performance is even lower because of chronic health and age and so many things. And I was like, my love, actually, like if you could just hold my heart, if you could ask me regularly how my heart is and where my spirit is, do you have capacity for that to show up consistently and just check in on those things? Because that is one of their greatest skill sets. They're really brilliant. Like they just deep, deep fucking magic that one. And um, so again, my recommendation, specificity in the overall container and with each individual, what you're asking and what they're offering both. And then negotiating to a place to where you can get that to match. So um, yeah, so it's the clarity of the what and the time frame. So um, also noting that this piece around capacity and capability and performance, like I think of your capacity as like all things going well, this is what you have the capacity to show up for. Your capability is like, okay, and also day to day life throws you the fuck off course, like it does so many of us. So maybe that's like capacity threshold at capability is a little more here, realistically. And then I think of performance is like, okay, and then also like really actually though, where and how are you able to show up with consistency? Because that consistency is another piece. Um, yeah. So these pieces, I think being able to name these, and some of this is just being able to know yourself and the people that you've invited into your pod or your support weave, them being able to know themselves. And sometimes you don't figure it out until you're in the shit. Like, that's just how it goes. So having compassion for that. But another piece is, so I mentioned consistency. Whew, yeah. So I think, and I mentioned this in the last video about like pod mapping, is it's better to have a good enough parent. It's better to be consistent and be average than to go above and beyond and also fail. So um, ask the people who are showing up to you to like tell you their baseline and then let them wow you. But ideally minimize the opportunity for it to fail. Um, that's, I think, really important, especially because, especially like this individualist culture, we've just been too often let down, and this is creating a support weave or a pod is it's an opportunity to show up for and model collective care, and we don't want to perpetuate undue harm. So um, I use the term weave extremely purposefully when talking about these things because I I do weaving, and I think that's maybe where I came up with that. But in a paradigm of community care and collective care, each of us is but a thread, and an individual or even two individuals isn't expected to hold the entire cloth. So we each have our own weight bearing. And if you've ever worked with handmade thread, it's not exactly the most even. So your weight bearing depends on where you're at along the thread line, right? Um, so allowing for that, and just remembering that together is more. So anytime you're like, oh, I can't bear this weight, you need to be pulling in other threads wherever you're able to. So inviting a lot of that into this process. And we're going to talk about that during the class on December 6th, is practices of noticing when, like, what does it feel like in my body when I'm like, oh, somebody's asking me to show up. I definitely want to say yes. And for myself, I really need to say, or I want to say no. I had to do this today, and I had a moment of like, oh, No, I want to show up and no, it actually doesn't make sense for me to do that right now. And I know you have other people. So, is there a neighbor we could ask? Is there this or that? It's, oof, your heart. You have to be able to take care of your own stuff in this. So, aim for consistency rather than risking failure. It's just not worth the harm that it can do to people when they expect you to be there and then you're not. So we don't want to keep doing that. And then I guess along that is like learning to lead by reaching out. So if let's say there's 5 people in your weave and there's a center person and all 5 of you are supporting this person, if one of you isn't able to show up and the other 4 can't make up that weight load, then you need to start reaching out. And ideally you could all do that. Like, oh, this this corner is drifting, like we need to pull in more support, where are more threads, and reaching out. And that's where, if you look at pod mapping, I mean, this uses like the little, think of them as little bubbles, uh, and unfortunately I see those bubbles as static because they're on a flat page, but that's not how it was built. They were built to be able to be more mobile, and I wish that it was more of a um, moving 3D image than static. But anyway, in the class, we're going to play with that, having a lot more fluidity and a lot more flexibility so that folks can get a sense of how to make that work in support of not just the person at the center being supported, but in support of the entire week. So there's that. Um, that being said, another kind of like tip and trick is plan for failure. There was a point where my whole pod was just not fucking present. And I'm glad that I planned for failure. And I also planned for tending to my heart if that had happened. Because it did. So I think it's better to like know in advance. If all my people fail, if all of my resources just, I can't reach for them, what next? What now? And how do we loop other people into supportive accountability? And again, I've got a lot of tips and tricks for kind of how to do that. And depending on who shows up to the class, like we'll see what comes forth. But because it's only 3 hours, and this could easily be a weekend project. So yeah. Mm, what else? For the people who are supporting, if you have to give a no, then invite curiosity and creativity, right? So that example of like, I want to, and I'm going to say no for other reasons. What else is possible? And being able to follow up the no's with what else is possible in tangible ways. So, um, reaching out to other group members and saying, hey, I think this person who maybe could do that thing that's been asked of me. Is it possible that you could put us in touch? These kind of things. That's what I think of as the weaving portion. It's just thinking more broadly. What else? Oh, using rituals, or if that's, rituals too woo-woo for you, then you just say intentions. Like being intentional about supporting this interconnectivity. Um, so an example might be we come together for dinner when we get together, and maybe it's online. Maybe we're all dispersed. Like my pod, not everybody was local, so we met online. But maybe you bring your dinner with you, and you have a little bit of just social hangout time to connect as people before you start doing the care work, things like that. Also, just doing things together. I really enjoyed reaching out to when I've been in pods, I've often reached out to other members to like form connections that were personal around other people there that, maybe they did or didn't continue after the pod. That wasn't the point. The point was during the weave time, during that time frame that we've been set, that we all had as open communication as possible. So, some of the functional lessons, which I think are supported by that, are going to be the like, what is the back channel? Using a back channel. I'll go through all of that in the class, but yeah, what else? The doorbell threw me off. ADHD brain. Um, yeah, there's so much there. So much of it kind of depends on. Oh my god. Okay, I'll be right back. Thank you for bearing with this interruption. Um, oh, the functional lesson. So back channel. Oh, I didn't explain what a back channel is, right? So let's say somebody's at the center being supported, and you have a Marco Polo group or a WhatsApp or Signal group, whatever, email group, an area in which you're all connected. And the back channel is the same group, but without the person who's in need. So that person isn't in that group. And first of all, get their consent because they might want to be in that group but be silent. Um, because some of us have anxiety or other reasons. Who knows? Maybe because they want to check it when they do. But I recommend that ideally they have enough trust with the people they've asked to support them to not be in that group. Because there's times when you want to do logistical things and they don't need to be fucking bothered with it because they've got enough going on. Also, sometimes you just need to check in with the rest of the group to be like, hey, this person asked for something and there's fucking crickets in the room, y'all. Where are you? What do you need to be able to show up? Like holding each other accountable as a weave, kind of tugging and being like, my loves, it's okay if you don't have the capacity or the time, but communicate with us about that. This kind of thing. So I find the back channel really important, not just for the person being centered, but also for the people who are doing the weaving, like, so that we get the care that we need in the support. Or if say somebody's like, "Wow, I'm really hard pressed to support right now with this thing, like it's pinging my shit." The support weave might be able to be like, "Oh, wow, I hear you. I have some recommendations for that." Or here's how I'm living with this challenge. Things like that. So that the person who's being supported doesn't have to um, bear witness to that or feel like they need to take care of that, or it can just happen. So, another functional lesson that I've learned is like, if you look at Mingus's map on, like, for the pod mapping, there's a person in the center, and then there's like the primary folks around them or organizations. Ideally, they're people. I think of that much more holistically, and also like, um, what are the plants that bring you support? Who are the ancestors you need to call on? What's the number for the neighbor who will come and take you for a walk and get you out of the house? Which of your friends lives closest that can come and just stop by with a puzzle? Um, who do we know that you know works at the closest clinic that could get you in? Like, these kind of things, I think is really an important part to map out. Um, and I think those things maybe might need to be a little bit closer than what pod mapping technology suggests. But then the second ring of folks. So let's say, so I had a sweetheart who I did not ask to be a part of my primary pod group, and they came to me a little like, ouch, like I thought we were close and you didn't ask me to be a part of this. I don't, like, do you mind talking to me about that? And I was like, well, yeah, I need people that are not in the immediate group, that are a little off, that are like second or third tier. Because if my first immediate people are all up in it, I need fresh eyes and I need another perspective that isn't with all the information. I also have loved ones and sweeties and friends who may have the capacity but don't actually typically have the capability, or their performance just isn't there, and that's fine because we need people in these different tiers. A weave isn't just this little square; it's a whole cloth. So being able to communicate that to people that this isn't hierarchized, and that folks can come in and go. Sometimes somebody who's closest in the weave that like something comes up, or in the end it's not a fit, or whatever it may be. Maybe you don't want them to be there anymore, and you can ask them to step away, and maybe you ask somebody else to step in. So that's why I was saying like these structures should be more fluid when we're thinking about them. So what else? Hmm. Hmm. I have so many more. I feel like I could just keep going. It's like I said, the class on the 6th, if you register, we are going to stream it online, but it's not going to be built for folks online. I will do that class in the future, but this one I am going to do locally, in person in Montreal. If you register, for folks who have a hard time getting out, or just don't want to, uh, I will stream it, but it won't be built for you online, because I haven't done that labor yet. But I will in the winter. I will do that. So if you want to wait, you could. But if you want to go ahead and register now, then you can at least see the class and hear the class in action. My intention is to have a microphone on, so you'll be able to hear everything and you'll be able to kind of see the room. But uh, but it's not an online class yet. So, and the more you tell me you're interested in pod mapping and support weaving, the more I know to forefront and focus on making that class available online. So let me know if that's of interest. So yeah. Oh, right. So I've been talking about some of like the lessons that I've learned in being a part of support weaves or pod maps, and I just thought like what are some of the hardships too, and some of the greatest joys? Like, let me sit with that for a second. I think for me, one of the greatest joys is to be a part of doing something different, of weaving in creative, curious, collective ways that allow someone to be held while also inviting in accountability. So, an example might be a somebody we were supporting. I was in a pod for. We were supporting around. Let's say I'm trying to think of an example to make it anonymous. Let's say their um, their partner, um, the partner had become incapacitated, and they were learning how to adjust their life to be able to support them in that, and to be able to tend to themselves as well in order to be a care person in a role of support. Um, and the weave had come together for 6 months to kind of help them through this transition and bring in resources and create more of a foundation of holding. So this person felt whole because they held. They hadn't felt much of that before, like many of us. So we were doing that, and as we neared the end of the 6 months, their relationality to their identity as a caregiver had greatly changed in those 5 months, and they'd gone from like wow, I have to do this, to, oh, I get to do this. I get to tend and care to, with my loved one, and I get to learn all these things, and we get to navigate this life change together. Like they'd really made this incredible transition, and what I think of as a fucking short amount of time, 5 months. Um, but that had then become part of their identity, and then they were doing a lot of writing, almost you might say writing a book about this new identity. And they asked the support pod, can you help me through this, um, this publishing of this book? And on the back channel, we struggled with that, and we were like, oh, that was not in the original ask. This is, and to the person asking, it was a part of this process they were in. But the thing is this process they were in was going to be for the rest of their life, very likely. So we had agreed to 6 months in a lot of specificity. And so collectively we said, as your support weave, no, we're not going to walk you through the care of this, all the editing, supporting you with the editing and finding publishers and like all of this. Like we're not going to do that labor. Some of us are available for specific asks, but overall, collectively, the weave is not here for this. And that no is really important. Again, the ability to be really specific about what we want and about what we're offering, and making sure we actually show up, and being very clear about it when we're not able to, so that we don't falter and leave somebody feeling like they've been left alone. We want to have as much due diligence as possible to not do that. So, um, yeah, that was both a challenge and a joy to be able to watch that, be a part of that process. So, uh, something that I've heard from multiple people now is that they've gone to put together a pod and everyone said no. And so they were left with, or there was nobody they could think of that they even thought would say yes, so they didn't even ask. This is our world. Like, that's a reality for a lot of people. Um, and when they came back to me with this, these were a couple of folks who either told me, like, after having attended a pod mapping class, because it's not built for that technology, or after like hearing from me about the pod going off and trying to put it together, and then coming back and being like, wow, what happened? Like, nobody's able to show up for me. And I had to remind them, like, this isn't just about people. This is much more about the collective resourcing, and that includes you. That includes your ancestors or your spirituality. That includes, the things that help you rest, and the things that fill your cup, because these are often different. These include the mechanisms of your daily life. If you know that listening to a lot of news stresses you the fuck out, and your pod isn't showing up for you, and you're also stressed the fuck out because of the news, what do you have control over right now? Shifting your relationship to the news. I'm not saying don't do news. I'm saying shifting your relationship. That's a whole different rabbit hole we can go down a different time. But um, the self resourcing part, I think that when we're in crisis mode, those pieces can just kind of falter to the floor, and we can hope and wish that somebody's just going to pick them up. And maybe you're lucky enough to get that, and a lot of us don't. So, what's wonderful about putting together a sort of support weave map of what your constellations and connections in the universe looks like before the need is there, is that when you have a need come up, because sometimes you see it coming, like with my husband moving out, I saw it coming. Like, I knew about a year leading into, I was like, oh, this is coming up. um, And then because we allowed him to be able to make that choice from an autonomous place, uh, I was allowed to give it a lot of spaciousness. So for me in my pod, there wasn't anything urgent. It was merely imminent, as opposed to somebody who has just lost their partner. That is urgent, right? So if you haven't done any of that mapping and then suddenly you're doing that mapping and figuring this out from a place of survival and collapse or freeze or fight or wherever the fuck your nervous system is, that's a lot harder. So ideally we can do these exercises in advance of their needs so that when the need arises, not if but when, we're already a little bit more prepared. I think of it as like having an advance directive, right? So, and even then, that's, I know firsthand experience. Even when you have an advance directive, it doesn't mean that it gets used or found or that you have access to it or that anybody is listening to you. So, but you can at least attempt to do your due diligence. So, um, if you're mapping out the people who support you, the resources that support you, the things that allow you to rest, and things that are regenerative, then when you're in extreme need, those things don't feel quite so far away. Um, we're more likely to follow through with something if we already have a plan. So I did a lot of phone banking for elections over the years, and we really focused on helping voters talk about what their plan was to get to the voting office. Like, literally, what is the number of the bus? And I'm Googling to help them figure out their route to get to the voting booth because you're more likely to follow through if you have a plan. And that's what pod mapping and support weave constellation creation is about. So yeah, there's a little bit of that. Feel free to DM me if you've got questions or if there's a rabbit hole you want to go diving down. I love that. If you've had experiences with pods or support weaves, I would love to hear about them. Like if you want to nerd out about it together with me or just ask a bunch of questions, I'm down for either of those. So feel free to reach out. I'll put the registration link in here, or it's in my bio. It's December 6th. It's in Montreal. Like I said, we'll stream it, but it's not built for online yet. I'll do that in the winter. Um, oh, we're going to provide dinner. So that's nice. So it'll just be one pot. It'll be like gluten-free, vegan. If there's other things you need us to be aware of, please just reach out. And there will be translation to French. Goldjian's going to offer that. And what else? I think that's it. There's like accessibility information on the registration through Eventbrite. It's pay what you can donation between 5 and 60. It's a 3-hour class, so pass on the support if you're able to for those who don't have that access. And that's about it. Yeah, okay. I'm looking forward to doing more of this with y'all, so feel free to let me know what you're thinking about. All right. Love ya. Bye.